The tension was palpable as security attempted to remove a man from the field during a high-stakes football game. Little did they know, the man wasn't just any spectator, he was the one who owned the entire team. What happened next left the crowd stunned, igniting a ripple of change that would echo through the world of sports. The atmosphere in the stadium buzzed with excitement, the energy crackling as fans in Arlington, Texas, leaped from their seats. The air was thick with the scent of popcorn and sizzling hot dogs, while the field shimmered under the stadium's floodlights. Everything was running like a well-oiled machine, a seamless moment in time, until it wasn't. Moments before halftime, a man appeared on the edge of the field. Dressed in a sharp, charcoal suit, he stood tall, his posture commanding, exuding an aura of authority. Yet, something about his appearance seemed out of place. No team gear, no clipboard, no sideline pass, just pure confidence wrapped in a sleek suit. The crowd barely noticed at first. But then, the quiet murmur of the game shifted as two security guards marched toward him. The subtle shift in the air rippled through the stands like a wave building to a crescendo. It started as a few exchanged glances, a small buzz. Cameras on the jumbo screen caught the man's unflinching face, an image that contrasted starkly with the urgency of the security guards approaching him. "Hey, you can't be here," one of the guards barked, his voice cutting through the stadium's din. The man didn't flinch, his hands slipping into his pockets as he remained utterly unbothered. "I'm here for business," he said, his voice calm but tinged with an undeniable edge. "No pass, no business," the second guard snapped, motioning for him to step behind the barricade. But the man didn't move. Instead, he pointed to the bench, his expression unreadable. "That's my business," he replied, his words deliberate and unwavering. The guards weren't backing down. One pulled out a radio, calling for backup. Meanwhile, the front row fans leaned forward, sensing that something bigger was unfolding before their eyes. Players on the bench exchanged confused looks, unsure of who the man was but clearly uneasy about the growing tension. The man shifted his weight ever so slightly, yet his resolve didn't waver. "I don't need a pass," he said, voice firm. "You're making a mistake." A ripple of whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. What was happening? Was this part of the game? What was about to unfold would silence the entire stadium. As more security guards closed in, their voices grew louder, demanding that he leave. The game's whistles and cheers became distant, replaced by the mounting noise of the standoff. "This is your last warning," one guard shouted, hand hovering over the radio clipped to his shoulder. "Leave now, or we'll escort you out." But the man wasn't intimidated. His voice was sharp as he asked, "Escort me? Do you know who I am?" The question seemed to ignite something in the guards. Their response was immediate: "We don't care who you are. Rules are rules." From the sidelines, coaches and players began to take notice. A few assistant coaches exchanged bewildered looks, while one wide receiver, mid-conversation, paused to squint at the man. "Is that," he muttered, trailing off. The man's composure never cracked. Calmly, he pulled out his phone and began scrolling. "I think you'll want to reconsider," he said, showing them something on the screen. But before he could reveal whatever it was, one of the guards grabbed his arm. The crowd gasped in unison, the discomfort in the air palpable as fans leaned in, recording every moment. "Let go," the man said, his voice carrying a warning that sliced through the tension. The guard tightened his grip, pulling him backward, but the man stood firm, his feet rooted in place. The stadium cameras zoomed in, their lenses capturing every second of the confrontation, broadcasting it to the entire arena. "What's going on over there?" boomed the announcer, his voice cutting through the noise. The head coach stepped closer to the sidelines, furrowing his brow as he took in the scene. Recognition hit him like a jolt of electricity, and his face turned pale. "Stop," he shouted, waving his arms toward the guards. "Let him go." The guards froze, exchanging confused looks. The coach moved quickly, weaving through the players and staff, until he reached the man. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, his voice low but urgent. The guards, still reeling, whispered the name, barely audible over the rising hum of the crowd. "Mr. Caldwell," one repeated. The coach nodded, turning to the guards with a stern look. "This is our team's new majority owner," he said, the words hitting the air like a thunderclap. The impact was immediate. The guards, their faces draining of color, took a step back, their grip loosening. The man, adjusting his jacket with a subtle flick, brushed off the moment as though it were insignificant. "That's right," he said, his gaze unwavering as he looked directly at the guards. "I own this team." A wave of shock spread through the crowd, the whispers and gasps flooding the stadium. The jumbo screen flashed his calm, composed face, standing in stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around him. But the drama was far from over. The tension was thick now, the weight of the revelation settling heavily in the air. The atmosphere shifted again, moving from confusion to shock, then to something far heavier, discomfort. Conversations erupted in the stands. How had they not recognized him? Why hadn't they realized who he was? The guards stood, wide-eyed and awkward, their embarrassment evident. One of them stammered, We didn't know, sir. We were just doing our job." The man's gaze didn't soften. "Doing your job?" he repeated, his voice sharp and measured. "Or assuming something that wasn't yours to assume?" The guard opened his mouth, but no words came out. Cameras zoomed in on the man's face, capturing every detail as the tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. The man turned his attention to the players on the bench, now standing, some holding their helmets. Caldwell's expression softened as he addressed the coach, offering a brief nod of acknowledgement. "Thank you for stepping in," he said quietly. "But this moment isn't just about me. It's about what just happened. And why it happened." The coach nodded silently, stepping aside to allow him to speak. Caldwell took a deep breath before speaking again, his voice calm but piercing. "I'm not angry," he said, his words carrying a weight that settled on the crowd. "But I am disappointed. Not just in you, but in how often this happens to people who look like me." The statement landed like a thunderclap, drawing mixed reactions from the crowd, gasps, murmurs, and some quiet nods of agreement. Others sat back, uncomfortable, as if unsure how to respond. One of the guards attempted to apologize again, but Caldwell raised his hand to silence him. "No need for excuses," he said, his tone resolute. "I'd rather we talk about the lesson here." With that, he turned and began walking toward the center of the field, where all eyes had already shifted to him. The man moved toward the center of the field, the bright overhead lights casting a glow around him. The roar of the stadium had dimmed to a low hum, and even the players by the sidelines now turned their full attention to him. Though he had no microphone, his presence was so commanding that his voice carried effortlessly across the stadium. "I didn't come here to make a scene," Caldwell began, his voice steady and calm, but there was an undeniable strength in it. "But I also didn't expect to be made into one." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Phones were raised across the stands, capturing every word, every movement. Caldwell's gaze swept across the sea of faces, and in that moment, he had the undivided attention of every single person in the stadium. The tension was palpable as Caldwell stood there, his gaze sweeping over the silent stadium. What had just unfolded wasn't a personal affront to him alone. With a sweeping gesture, he pointed toward the guards who remained still, like statues caught in a moment of awkward stillness. "It's not just about me," he said, his voice calm yet resolute. "It's about something much bigger." The weight of his words hung in the air like a thick fog. "A mindset," he continued, "a habit of making assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't." A ripple of understanding moved through parts of the crowd, while others shifted nervously in their seats. His words cut deep. "You didn't recognize me," he addressed the guards directly, his tone firm but measured, "because I didn't look like what you expected." He paused, allowing the tension to build. "I could stand here and let that pass as a simple mistake," he went on, "but if I did that, what would I be teaching my players? What would I be teaching my fans?" The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. Caldwell's voice was steady, but there was an undeniable power behind it, as though he were speaking to each person individually, pulling them into his narrative. "You see, assumptions are dangerous," he declared. "They don't just cause embarrassment, they create walls. They send messages that some people don't belong when, in reality, it's the barriers that don't belong." A silence fell over the stadium as he let the words settle in. Then, the first hesitant clap broke through the stillness, quickly followed by others, as if the crowd was waking up to the truth he was sharing. "This team, this game, this stadium, they represent something bigger than football," Caldwell's voice rose, now powerful, filled with conviction. "They represent unity, a place where skill, dedication, and passion bring people together." The applause grew louder, swelling like a tide, reaching across the stands. Caldwell's hand rose, signaling for quiet. The roar of the crowd softened. "I didn't come here to play the victim," he said firmly, each word like a hammer striking against the complacency. "I came here to teach a lesson. One we all need to hear." His eyes swept across the crowd. "Never let someone's appearance dictate how you treat them. Not on this field. Not in this stadium. Not in this world." And then the eruption came, a thunderous cheer that rolled across the stands like a wave. It shook the very foundations of the stadium, and for a moment, Caldwell just stood there, soaking it all in. A nod, a glance at the guards, and then he added, "I hope, after tonight, you'll carry that lesson with you too." The guards, visibly shaken, nodded back, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and understanding. With a swift, symbolic gesture, Caldwell extended his hand to each of them, offering a handshake that spoke volumes. But that wasn't the end of it. Oh no! It was just the beginning. As Caldwell made his way off the field and back to his seat in the owner's box, the cameras followed his every step. The crowd couldn't take their eyes off him. The atmosphere in the stadium had shifted, what began as a tense confrontation had blossomed into something far more profound. A movement was born that would ripple through every corner of society. By the time the final whistle blew, social media was ablaze. Clips of the confrontation, Caldwell's powerful words, flooded every platform, sparking debates, discussions, and an outpouring of support. Hashtags like #WhoBelongsHere and #CaldwellLesson began trending, and it wasn't just about sports anymore. The conversation had transcended the game. It was now about society, about the way we judge one another, about how we treat those who don't look like us. The next day, the media couldn't stop talking about it. Some hailed Caldwell as a beacon of grace and leadership, while others were quick to criticize the guards for their actions, calling for accountability. But Caldwell, ever the unifying force, wasn't interested in fueling division. Instead, he released a simple, yet powerful statement that quickly went viral. Last night wasn't about shaming anyone, it read. It was about learning and teaching. I hope we all remember that what we assume about others says more about us than it does about them. Let's do better, together. And do better they did. In the days that followed, sports organizations, businesses, even schools began using Caldwell's speech as a tool for learning. Workshops on unconscious bias sprang up everywhere, with Caldwell's story at the center. The guards, once part of the controversy, came forward and publicly apologized, showing their commitment to growth. "We're all learning," Caldwell said in an interview. "The important thing is that we're willing to." Meanwhile, his story inspired deeper reflection within the league itself. Owners, coaches, and players all began to evaluate their own biases, not just on the field but in every aspect of their lives. And then, perhaps the most powerful ripple effect occurred. Letters from fans, from across the country, began pouring in. One, from a young boy in Arkansas, stood out. "I love football," he wrote, "but sometimes I don't feel like I fit in because I look different from my teammates. After seeing what you did, I feel proud to be me. Thank you for showing that we all belong." Caldwell shared the letter at a press conference, his voice thick with emotion. "This is why I did it," he said, holding the letter up for the world to see. "Because no one should ever feel like they don't belong." And just like that, it wasn't just a moment in time anymore, it was a movement, a revolution, one that spread far beyond the stadium, beyond the sport itself. Months later, the effects of Caldwell's actions were still being felt. The team, galvanized by their owner's leadership, launched an initiative called Game of Belonging. It focused on inclusivity, not just in sports, but in the community. Workshops were held everywhere, in schools, in corporate offices, in youth leagues. The message was clear: judge people by their character, not their appearance. Caldwell became a sought-after speaker, invited to share his message in places that needed it most. His story, his calm strength, had become a blueprint for others to follow. Assumptions are walls, he often said. But awareness is the sledgehammer that breaks them down. The guards, too, had become part of the narrative. They joined Caldwell in workshops, sharing their own journeys of growth and understanding. One of them admitted on television, "I didn't realize how quick I was to judge, but Mr. Caldwell taught me something that night. Now I'm teaching others what I learned." The stadium, where it all began, was transformed into a symbol of change. A plaque was installed outside the main entrance, engraved with Caldwell's words, "Never let someone's appearance dictate how you treat them." Fans stopped to take photos, their faces reflective as they read the inscription. It was a moment of personal reckoning. The most significant moment came during the team's playoff run that same season. Before the opening game, Caldwell was invited back to the center of the field to speak to the crowd. This time, there was no hesitation. The cheers were deafening as he stepped up to the microphone, his presence commanding the attention of every single person in the arena. "Tonight isn't about football," Caldwell began, his voice strong and clear. "It's about what this sport, and this world, can be when we stop seeing differences as barriers and start seeing them as strengths. Remember, you belong. We all do." The crowd erupted into applause, and as the players took the field, their hearts were filled with purpose. It wasn't just about winning the game anymore. It was about sending a message to the world. Caldwell's lesson had become a part of their journey. And so, the story leaves us with a question, a challenge, really: what assumptions are we holding on to? And how can we break them down? Change starts with us. Let's carry that lesson forward.